Earth's silent titan spoke. The galaxy listened for 5 centuries. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist. Their crimson fleet swept across star systems like a plague, consuming worlds and enslaving species. The Hegemony Council, led by the ruthless High Regent Korath, demanded absolute obedience. Those who resisted were reduced to cosmic dust. Those who submitted lived as servants to their hegemony masters. The galaxy had learned to bow. The proud Zelani, once masters of quantum manipulation, now mined crystals on frozen moons. The fierce Krathri warriors, who had never known defeat, served as expendable shock troops. The wise Etherians, keepers of ancient knowledge, were forced to design weapons for their oppressors. Then came humanity. Earth had been discovered just 50 years ago. A small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. The humans seemed insignificant. No advanced technology, no vast fleets, no ancient wisdom. They were young, barely having mastered interstellar travel. The hegemony catalogued them as primitive class 7 and moved on to more pressing conquests. But humans had something the galaxy had forgotten. They had hope in the depths of space. Beyond the orbit of Neptune, something stirred. The UES Prometheus had been under construction for 30 years, hidden from hegemony sensors by experimental stealth technology. It was humanity's greatest secret, their final gambit. While the hegemony saw Earth as a backward world, humans had been preparing for war. Commander Alina Vasquez stood on the bridge of Prometheus, her dark eyes reflecting the stars beyond. She was young for a ship commander, barely 40, but she carried the weight of her entire species on her shoulders. Behind her, the bridge hummed with quiet efficiency. No dramatic displays, no shouting orders, just professional humans doing what they did best, turning the impossible into inevitable. Status report, Dr. Chen, Alina said, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Dr. James Chen, the ship's chief engineer and the architect of Prometheus, itself consulted his readings. All systems optimal, Commander. The quantum displacement drive is stable. Gravitational shields are operating at maximum efficiency. The matter disintegrator is ... ready. Alina nodded. The matter disintegrator. Humanity's answer to hegemony. Superiority. While other species had developed energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, humans had gone further. They had learned to unmake matter itself, to reduce anything to its component atoms and scatter them across space. Incoming transmission from Earth, reported Lieutenant Martinez. At communications, put it through. The face of Admiral Thorne appeared on the main screen. The old warrior looked tired, his grey beard unable to hide the stress lines around his eyes. Alina, we've just received the hegemony's final ultimatum. Complete surrender in 72 hours, or they begin orbital bombardment of our major cities. Alina felt her jaw tighten. Understood, Admiral. Are the evacuation protocols in place? As ready as they can be. But Alina, ... there are 8 billion people down here. We can't save them all. You won't have to, sir. Prometheus is moving to intercept. Admiral Thorne's expression softened slightly. The entire species is counting on you, Commander. Make us proud. Always do, sir. Vasquez out. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Alina turned to address her crew of 200 souls. They were the best humanity had to offer. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, all volunteers who knew they might never see Earth again. Ladies and gentlemen, Alina began, her voice carrying across the bridge in 2 hours. We jumped to the hegemony's capital system. They expect us to surrender. Instead, we're going to show them something they've never seen before. We're going to show them what happens when you threaten humanity. The jump to hyperspace was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Prometheus didn't simply disappear and reappear like conventional ships. It seemed to fold space around itself, bending reality until it emerged in the Arcturus system. Heart of hegemony power, High Regent Korath was in his war chamber when the alerts began screaming. The massive hegemony station that orbited Arcturus Prime suddenly detected an enormous gravitational anomaly. Something was coming. Report. Korath's voice boomed across the chamber. The alien was 8 feet tall, his chitinous armor gleaming under the red lights. 4 arms gestured imperiously while his compound eyes focused on the tactical display. "Unknown vessel, my lord," stammered a technician. It's massive. Larger than anything in our databases." On the screen, Prometheus emerged from its dimensional fold. The ship was a monument to human engineering. 3 kilometers long, its hull was a masterwork of stealth composite and reactive armor. No ornate decorations or intimidating spikes like hegemony vessels. Just clean lines and purposeful design. It looked like what it was, a tool built for a specific job. "Identification," Korath demanded. "No response to our hails, my lord. But we're detecting massive energy signatures. Power output is ... impossible. It exceeds our measurements." Korath's eyes narrowed. "Deploy the fleet. I want every ship in the system focused on that vessel." Across the Arcturus system, hegemony ships began moving. Cruisers, destroyers, dreadnoughts, over 200 vessels converging on the human ship. Their weapons powered up, casting angry red glows in the darkness of space. On Prometheus, Alina watched the approaching fleet with calm determination. "They're taking the bait. Dr. Chen, are we ready for the demonstration?" "All systems green. Commander, target selected." Alina nodded toward the communications officer. "Open a channel. All frequencies. Across the galaxy. Species that had access." 2 long-range communications suddenly received an unprecedented transmission. The image of a human woman appeared on screens from the core worlds to the outer rim. "I am Commander Alina Vasquez of the United Earth ship Prometheus," she began, her words carrying across light years in real time through quantum entanglement networks. "For 500 years, the hegemony has ruled through fear and oppression. They have enslaved worlds, destroyed cultures, and murdered billions." On the hegemony command station, Korath watched in growing rage. "Cut that transmission." "We cannot, my lord. They're broadcasting on quantum frequencies. It's impossible to block." Alina continued, unaware of the chaos her words were causing. "Today, that ends. The hegemony has demanded Earth's surrender. Our response is simple. We refuse." She paused, allowing her words to sink in across 1,000 worlds. In the slums of conquered planets, slaves looked up at screens with something they hadn't felt in generations: hope. To the hegemony, we say this: "You have seen what happens to those who oppose you. Now see what happens when you oppose us." Alina turned to Dr. Chen. "Fire." Prometheus's main weapon was elegantly simple in concept, impossibly complex in execution. It didn't launch projectiles or energy beams. Instead, it created a targeted quantum field that convinced matter it no longer needed to exist. The field lanced out from the ship's forward array, invisible to the naked eye but devastating in its effect. Korath's flagship, the Decimator, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons. The next moment, there was empty space. No explosion, no debris field. The ship and its crew of 10,000 had been reduced to their component atoms and scattered across. The void, the hegemony fleet, stopped dead in space. Across the galaxy, species that had been watching the transmission fell silent. What weapon could simply delete a dreadnought from existence? Elena's voice cut through the shocked silence. That was a demonstration. The hegemony has 1 hour to withdraw all forces from human space and release all enslaved populations. If you refuse, we will begin systematic removal of your fleet assets. She looked directly into the camera, and for a moment, every being watching could see something in her eyes that the hegemony had tried to destroy across the galaxy. They saw defiance. They saw courage. They saw hope. To the enslaved peoples of the galaxy, Elena said, her voice softening, we have not forgotten you. Freedom is coming. The transmission ended, leaving space in stunned silence. On 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 hidden places, beings looked at each other with new possibility in their eyes. The humans had done the impossible. Someone had finally stood up to the hegemony, and they had made it look easy. High Regent Korath stared at the empty space where his flagship had been. In 500 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like it. The humans had technology that defied everything the hegemony understood about physics. "My lord," whispered his aide, "what are your orders?" Korath's compound eyes fixed on the human ship floating serenely in space, waiting. Around it, his fleet had pulled back, suddenly uncertain. For the first time in his long life, the High Regent of the hegemony felt something he had never experienced before. He felt fear. One ship changed everything. The day fear learned humanity's name, the hour passed like a held breath across the galaxy. On hegemony worlds, administrators frantically tried to contact their superiors. In slave quarters, whispered conversations spoke of impossible hope. On neutral worlds, diplomats watched their screens with fascination and terror. High Regent Korath stood in his war chamber, surrounded by his generals and advisors. The massive alien's 4 arms gestured angrily as he processed reports from across hegemony space. "Status of the fleet," he demanded. General Vex, his chief military commander, consulted the tactical displays. "All available ships are converging." "On Arcturus, my lord, we will have over 1,000 vessels within 6 hours, and our response to their ... ultimatum." The chamber fell silent. For 5 centuries, the hegemony had never retreated, never negotiated, never shown weakness. To do so now would signal to every conquered world that the empire could be challenged. "My lord," spoke Ambassador Zelani, one of the few non-hegemony species allowed in the inner circle. "Perhaps we should consider their demands. This human technology..." Korath's head snapped toward her with predatory speed. "You suggest we bow to primitives, show weakness to the entire galaxy?" Zelani, a graceful being with silver skin and large, intelligent eyes, stood her ground. "I suggest we survive, my lord. That weapon, it doesn't just destroy, it erases. I've never seen anything like it. Nor will you again," Korath snarled. "Deploy the Deep Strike Fleet. If these humans want to play with forces beyond their understanding, we'll show them the true power of the hegemony." As if summoned by his words, alerts began sounding throughout the station. The human ship was moving. On Prometheus, Commander Alina Vasquez watched the chronometer reach 0. Dr. Chen, scanning shows no hegemony withdrawal from human space. Are you ready to proceed? The chief engineer nodded grimly. Quantum disintegrator is fully charged. We can fire continuously for approximately 4 hours before requiring a recharge cycle. Alina felt the weight of history on her shoulders. What they were about to do would either save humanity or doom it. There would be no middle ground. All stations, this is the commander. We are about to engage multiple hostiles. Remember your training, trust your crewmates, and make every shot count. The people of Earth are depending on us. She turned to the communications officer. Lieutenant Martinez, broadcast on all frequencies. Let the galaxy watch. Once again, Elena's image appeared on screens across known space. This time, her expression was harder, more resolved. The hegemony has chosen war, she said simply. So be it. The first wave of hegemony ships had formed a battle line 300 kilometers from Prometheus. 30 dreadnoughts, their weapons charging with ominous red light. They had faced rebellions before, crushed entire fleets with overwhelming firepower. They had never faced humanity. Prometheus moved forward with surprising grace for such a massive vessel. Its engines bent space-time around it, allowing impossible maneuvers that should have torn the ship apart. As it approached the hegemony line, it began to change. Dr. Chen had designed the ship with modular capabilities. Now, hidden panels opened along its hull, revealing weapon arrays that had been concealed during its initial appearance. Not just the quantum disintegrator, but kinetic railguns, plasma projectors, and something the galaxy had never seen before. Nanite swarm launchers. All weapons, target the flanking vessels, Alina ordered. Show them what coordinated fire looks like. The battle was unlike anything in galactic history. The hegemony fleet opened fire first, filling space with deadly energy. Plasma bolts that could melt asteroids, graviton missiles that could crack a moon. The entire firepower of 30 dreadnoughts focused on one human ship. Prometheus's shields absorbed the assault without even flickering. The ship's defensive systems weren't just energy barriers like other species used. They were reality manipulators, fields that convinced incoming weapons they were firing at empty space. Elena's response was surgical. The quantum disintegrator spoke 6 times in rapid succession. 6 hegemony dreadnoughts simply ceased to exist, deleted from reality with clinical precision. The nanite swarms found their targets next. Microscopic machines that consumed enemy hulls from the inside out, turning mighty warships into expanding clouds of metallic dust. Within 10 minutes, the first wave was gone. The second wave approached more cautiously. 50 ships this time, including 2 of the hegemony's feared world killers, massive vessels designed to crack planets. They spread out, trying to avoid the human ship's devastating main weapon. Alina smiled grimly. They were learning, unfortunately. For them, Prometheus had been designed by humans who had studied every recorded hegemony battle for 50 years. They knew every tactic, every strategy. Dr. Chen, initiate Protocol 7. The chief engineer's hands flew over his controls. Quantum tunneling mines deployed, Commander. Space around the hegemony fleet suddenly became deadly. Prometheus had scattered microscopic devices that existed in quantum superposition simultaneously, everywhere and nowhere until they chose to collapse into reality. When they did, they materialized inside enemy hulls. Their fusion cores already critical, hegemony ships began exploding from within. Not the clean erasure of the disintegrator, but violent detonations that lit up the darkness. Within minutes, Another 20 ships were gone. On the command station, High Regent Korath watched his fleets die with growing desperation. How is this possible? One ship cannot defeat our entire navy. Ambassador Zilani, who had remained silent during the slaughter, finally spoke. My lord, I have studied human history since their discovery. They are ... different from other species. Different how? Korath snarled. Asterisk. They don't just wage war, my lord. They perfect it. Every conflict in their history has driven innovation, forced evolution. While we conquered through superior numbers, they conquered through superior thinking. As if to prove her point, Prometheus suddenly vanished from sensors. Not cloaked, gone. The massive ship had somehow folded itself out of normal space-time. Where did it go? Korath demanded. His answer came from behind the third wave of attacking ships. Prometheus emerged from its dimensional pocket directly in the middle of the hegemony formation. At point-blank range, its weapons were devastating. The quantum disintegrator fired continuously, erasing ships faster than the eye could follow. Railguns sent projectiles through multiple holes. Plasma projectors turned armor into superheated gas. In less than 5 minutes, 40 more ships were destroyed. Across the galaxy, the impossible battle was being watched by billions. On conquered worlds, slaves began to whisper. On neutral worlds, governments held emergency sessions. On hegemony worlds, administrators began quietly preparing evacuation plans. The fourth wave never came. Instead, a new transmission arrived at Prometheus. High Regent Korath himself appeared on the main screen, his compound eyes reflecting defeat. Commander Vasquez, the alien, began, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. I request negotiations. Alina studied the being who had terrorized the galaxy for 5 centuries. She saw fear in his eyes, and something else, respect. High Regent, she replied formally, my terms remain unchanged. Complete withdrawal from human space, release of all enslaved populations, dissolution of the conquest fleets. You ask me to destroy the hegemony, Korath said. I ask you to evolve it, Alina corrected. The age of conquest is over. The age of cooperation begins now. For a long moment, Korath stared at the human commander. Around his station, his advisors and generals waited for his decision. Throughout the galaxy, billions held their breath. Finally, the High Regent spoke. I accept your terms. The words echoed across space, carried by quantum transmissions to every corner of known civilization. On 1,000 worlds, chains fell. From prisoners' hands, in 1,000,000 slave quarters, beings looked up at the stars with new hope. But Alina wasn't finished. She stood from her command chair, her image broadcast to the galaxy. Citizens of all worlds, she began, her voice carrying the authority of victory. Today marks not the end of one empire, but the beginning of something greater. Humanity offers not conquest, but partnership, not slavery, but freedom, not fear, but hope. She paused, looking directly into the camera with the same defiance that had started this conflict. We are all children of the same stars. It's time we started acting like it. The transmission ended, leaving space in a different kind of silence than before. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of possibility. On Earth, Admiral Thorne watched the displays with tears in his eyes. 8 billion people were safe. More than that, they were free. And throughout the galaxy, species that had forgotten what freedom meant were remembering. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of Prometheus, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed so cold and distant. Behind her, Dr. Chen was already working on new designs, not weapons this time, but hospitals and schools and research stations. Humanity had built one ship so powerful that the universe held its breath, but more importantly, they had shown the galaxy something it had almost lost. That sometimes the greatest strength was knowing when not to use power at all. The age of the hegemony was over. The age of humanity had begun, and the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter. Asterisk,